the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you are answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. At the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
This seminar is sponsored by BEM Systems, Brown and Caldwell, and brought to you by the Stevens Institute Center for Environmental Systems.
Thank you very much, and it's really happy to be back here at Stevens. It's been a while since I came here, but like I said, I'm really happy to be here to talk about a topic that's really like near and dear to my heart, and that's sustainability. As your professor said, I'm a practitioner in the field for 25 years. So I think I have, going to probably give you like a little bit of a different approach to sustainability. I think that's based on actual practice. And I think, you all take classes and you hear about sustainability in your classes. And like you're very interested in it, obviously, because you're here. So you're probably wondering, how can I make a career out of this? And then if you're like working already at a company, you're probably wondering, hey, how can I make this organization more sustainable? So what I'm hoping to do is give you some takeaways from my lecture tonight where you could possibly bring that back and bring that to your organization. As I said, if you're a student here trying to like make a career out of this, is understanding like sustainability on like a very practical sense and how you can incorporate that into the work that you do. So I guess this is the part where I get to brag about myself, right? So this is just a little bit about myself. Again, I'm an alumni here. I really attribute Stevens actually to a lot of the success I had in my career. It's a great program, and I can't recommend it enough, really. So glad you're all also part of the program. I have 25 years in the industry. First started working in like a lot for private companies. And around 2000, I really made a career shift where I started working on a lot of these large infrastructure projects, especially in New York City. And that's when a lot of the sustainability work that I'm going to talk about tonight really started for me, and I became really, I think, very engaged in doing that. And I've done work all throughout the U.S. In fact, I'm going to California next week to work on a project for LA Metro. And also done some work in China and other places overseas. So have like a really comprehensive experience, and I hope to share some of that with you tonight. So just like a little list of people that I work with, just to give you a sense. And these are all clients that I've done sustainability work for. So when you look at this slide, I thought two things. Well, one of my main clients is New York City Transit, and why is that the biggest font on the side? So that was one thing I saw. The other thing was federal into sustainability. Yes, they actually really are, and I've done a lot of work, like not a green prison, but a lot of the people there are really into sustainability and environmental management, which is actually great to see. Great people. So I've done some work with them too on sustainability. It's that cross-cutting of a topic. So let's get into it a little bit. So this is this classic example of sustainability here, this three-legged stool, right? Well, one thing I always think about is not a huge fan of this graphic or this representation of sustainability. I mean, I could go into the whole UN definition of sustainability, but I think you probably get that like the first day of every single class that you have. So I'm not going to go into that. But one of the things I think about a stool, for all of you who sat on stools before, and I know I have, being the youngest of 27 first cousins, I've sat on a lot of stools in my life. And you know what? They're very uncomfortable, right? That's the first thing we think about a stool. And then the second part of that stool is if one of these legs is somewhat shorter, well, then you can't really sit on it, right? So that right there is sort of a flaw in this representation of sustainability. So that's why I don't necessarily like it so much, the three-legged stool concept. It's good. It kind of represents sort of the three tenets of sustainability we always talk about: environment, social, and economics. But again, the representation isn't the greatest. And then here's this other great representation of sustainability. These are all probably like every first day of your classes. You get the three-legged stool, you get this or this graphic, right? Where it's the nexus of all these things. And if like the whole world combines properly, you can find sustainability when they all meet up in the middle, right? Again, I'm not a huge fan of this graphic for a few different reasons. The two that just really kind of my main problems with that is in every project, all these factors never weigh equally, right? So it's, there's all different reasons we do projects. Sometimes it's mostly environmental. Sometimes it's really more social. And there's a lot of reasons, and we can talk about some examples where the social aspect of it is really the driver for the project, or the economics. Economics really drives most projects, to be honest with you. So the circles are never actually the same size. So then for them to kind of meet up in the middle is rather difficult. So again, this isn't great. And then the other flaw kind of in this representation is sustainability means different things to different organizations. So this is sort of this ideal representation, but it's not kind of what every single organization is going to look at as sustainability. So it's like the second flaw in that one. Again, as a practitioner in the field, I kind of like this concept where it's sort of a destination. It's sort of like that great vacation, in Tahiti, where we always dream about. That's what sustainably kind of is. It's a destination, and we're going to get there through kind of these concepts that we work at. Again, environment, social, economics, they all factor into it. But like kind of in reality, and I think the projects like we work on, and bless you, on a day-to-day basis, I feel like these are sort of the building blocks of how you get to be a sustainable organization. First of all is environmental compliance, regulatory compliance. It's a little icon there. That's sort of the baseline. That's where you need to be. That's what you have to do. So if you're not there and you're not complying with the law, like you can just never be sustainable. These just of a background for those of you who aren't, kind of new to these concepts. But that's what you have to do. That's the foundation of everything we do, is complying with these laws and regulations that come out every single day, and there's always a new issue, and we're always trying to solve these problems. So the second thing is EMS, or environmental management system. So that's the foundation of this temple of sustainability that we're building. So the columns there are sort of environmental management systems. And the one thing I liked about environmental management systems when I sort of got introduced to them around, late 90s, early 2000s, is it started introducing like management concepts into the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So we're not just complying with the laws. And usually when you're just complying with the laws, like everyone would do, you're going to do the minimal possible to comply with that. Well, now in EMS, we're going to take management concepts and we're going to try to not only just comply, but we're going to try to do it in a more kind of systematic approach. So it kind of applies that, and then because it's business, there's an efficiency, and there's sort of a dollars and cents savings to that. But again, it's missing the social aspect, and that's really what sustainability is. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to go into some examples of some organizations and what they do and what their definition of sustainability is and how they treat it. I think that's going to give you a little bit more the social aspect, which again can be a little abstract at times and see how they're kind of handling that. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. So just, again, give you a little bit of background and some of these other concepts, which you might not be as familiar with. So I love this, when I do this slide. It's probably people have seen presentations from me before, seen different versions of this. It's kind of like a Scrabble board. And it's all the different environmental or compliance regulations that apply to one project. So, and it's like, if you're not into the field, like it's just kind of like, it looks like a random collection of letters, like RCRA, RCRA, RCRA. Like, what's that? But, you know, there's people who spend their life, that regulation is their life's work. Clean Air Act is a big one for me. So all these things are just regulations, and we have to really understand them. And that's, again, the baseline of all the work that, like, I do and a lot of the people on environmental compliance do. Okay. 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 So just, again, just a little bit of it's like when you talk about laws and regulations, you got to remember there's a lot of different, like, jurisdictions and authorities. There's federal, state, New Jersey, New York, local, New York City, which I do a lot of work in, has its own laws and regulations. Union County has its own laws and regulations. So there's a lot of these things, local ordinances, you have to understand. Executive orders. We're talking a little bit about the work that I did with Federal Bureau of Prisons. A lot of sustainability work was done because of federal executive orders signed by the president, the various presidents who have signed them. So that a lot of that, where there's no guiding regulation, is driven by executive orders. The governor signs an executive order, which forces the state agencies to do things. So those all factor into it, and also standards. You know, a lot of times we forget about just like the standards, like the NFPA, the various different standards that apply to the engineering work that we do. Those all factor into things that we have to worry about. These are dynamic. Again, this is job security, so it's a good thing, but they're constantly changing. So they're getting more robust. They're getting repealed. They're getting changed. Their numbers are getting updated. This stuff it's very dynamic, and it requires you to really stay kind of really vigilant and watching over all this. So when you deal with the regulations laws, you kind of deal with them in two different ways. If you're kind of a new project, we're getting permits from these regulatory agents. I'm going to talk a little bit about that aspect of it. And if you're sort of an existing facility, like a lot of times you do a compliance audit, so you review the operations out of an existing facility and then figure out what they're doing and how they could comply with it. This is just sort of an example, just to kind of put this a little bit in context. This is actually an actual project I'm working on right now. This is new sewers that they're putting in Staten Island. So I think we're all kind of aware of, like, typically what a sewer project would be. Well, need for this is some of these people don't have sewers. Right now, some of these people are on septics in area of New York City. So they need to put these in. So we are working on right now doing all the environmental reviews and getting all the permits necessary for this project. We could talk about making this more sustainable, but we just that's this baseline of work here. So what we did is a wetlands there. So we had to go out, survey the wetlands, do all the analysis and GIS necessary to figure out what the potential impacts to that wetlands are, and then get the necessary permits. So for that project right there, which is a pretty straightforward project, these are all the various permits and approvals and sign-offs and determinations that we have to get for just to put the sewers in the streets in Staten Island. So you can see, it can be complex, and that's just the baseline of stuff that we need to do. So this is it. We're not even talking about how to make this project more sustainable now. Maybe put some green infrastructure in there or something. That's just the baseline. So to get to here, which is the actual installing of the sewers, we got to get through all of this. So that's just part of the process that we're doing. So that's just to give you a little bit of understanding of that baseline of work. This is kind of where it all really comes from. It's the same thing if you're putting in a power plant or a new transit facility, a subway line, or just anything. This is all what's required. So then we have this baseline of work. So environmental management systems. This is like something, it's like near and dear to my heart. I know Tom, who I work with, sort of the forgotten thing, but it's really the link between complying with the regulations and sustainability. Because right now, as we have our programs, so we want to do it in like a systematic way. And so again, introducing business concepts, just the environmental compliance strategy. So there's various standards. So anyone who's worked with ISO standards before knows that they're extremely regimented. So it has really put a lot of structure and a lot of documentation into how you look at complying with an agency. The other thing that's, I think, really fascinating about this is that for the first time, you're not just looking at, hey, what do I have to do to comply with the regulations? You're taking a more of a holistic look at your organization and saying, hey, what are my impacts from my operations that I'm doing? And how can I minimize them or make structure of the environmental management system? We're starting to get that sort of like the baseline of like what makes a sustainable organization. And the other thing I think is excellent about environmental management systems and how it kind of feeds to sustainability is it's really engaging for the employees. Anybody who works on those, it's not just a person sitting in a room with a binder. No, it takes an organization to kind of into the whole process. And I think some of the times when you talk about organizations and where people aren't engaged in their sustainability program, it's probably because they don't really have like a comprehensive environmental management system. So that's why I like to stress it, because I think at a real minimum, it's a really good engagement tool.
What's the full name of IS, or what's the full name of that?
Environmental management, ISO. So it's international. It's French, yeah. So it doesn't quite match up with the English, but it's the international standards. So the basic tenet of EMS, and I guess a lot of things in life, right? Plan, do, check, act. And it's essentially adding this feedback loop. And we can go into a little bit more about that, but that's like, if you remember one thing about EMS, which is on the quiz later on: plan, do, check, act. Okay, I just had to make sure people were listening, so I had to throw some jokes in there once in a while. So if we kind of, besides that, just as like what happens here, just we have a policy. So this management engagement in the process. They set an overall policy. Then people like us, we plan, make the plan, and then we implement it. Then we check to make sure that plan's right. And if there's anything wrong, you know what? We correct those and go back, and there's this constant feedback loop. So if you look at this, constant improvement, that's sustainability right at its forefront there. And that's why these types of systems in place, this kind of organization, this types of regimentation and documentation is sort of that link to sustainability. But it's sort of like there's that missing component. If you talk about compliance, well, okay, went too far. What you need to do, baseline. So this is just what you need to do. You have to do this if you want to comply with the laws. There's organizations that don't want to, but for the vast majority of us, we're going to comply with the law. Then for EMS, on that, we're going to minimize our impacts. We're going to get more efficient here. We're going to lessen our impact. That may most likely, when we look at our organization holistically, most likely is going to result in some kind of cost savings. So there's a business reason for doing that. And then sustainability. So not just looking at our impacts, maybe we're looking at external impacts, and we're going to maximize the use of our resources. And again, this is I think a forgotten sort of thing on sustainability, maximizing the use of resources. Like just for yourself, like if you make a certain amount of money, it's sustainable if you maximize what you're spending it on. It's the same thing with an organization, same thing with a lot of different other concepts. So it kind of introduces the external impacts. for example, one is the sort of goodwill an organization might have because of how they treat their work or treat the public. That's a sort of a social, that's something in the work that we do. So now that I kind of set the sort of the baseline here, I think this quote from the Harvard Business School report should make a little bit more sense to you. How high sustainability firms outperform low sustainability ones in the long run. It just makes like intuitive sense, right? We have a finance person in the front here. So it just makes sense because we're maximizing the use of our resources. Whether those resources are workers, whether those resources are money, whether it's our impact on the environment. So we're maximizing those, so we're going to outperform the other organizations that aren't so sustainable. So it's a good thing. So these are so I picked 4 organizations. Luckily there's a lot of different organizations out there who are very sustainable. But I want to pick 4, and I just want to talk a little bit about what their definition of sustainability is. So I chose SEPTA. I did 2 publics and 2 private. And these are symbols that they use in their sustainability reports. So SEPTA is interesting. That's for those who don't know, they operate the mass transit system in Philadelphia. So we know very well the sustainability. And one thing I think they focus on in their sustainability is really kind of getting the message out there. This is what sustainability is. This is what it means to SEPTA. So they do an awesome job of like public relations. They feel like they're engaging the public. That's going to result in sort of more kind of acceptance of their system. So they do a great job of that. They do a lot of technology, I think, is really good too, implementing a lot of new technologies to make the system more efficient, save energy, save money. So they've been very good about that. Google, again, very socially conscious organization, as most are in California. But one thing you might not know about Google is they operate a tremendous amount of data centers. So for Google, one of the big things with sustainability, besides the social aspects of sustainability, is their data centers, making them, the footprint smaller, making the stormwater impacts of a huge impervious surface where there's a lot of parking around these things less, using less energy in their data center. All those things represent sustainability at Google. It's a little bit different than you might think, and of course all the other activities they have with alternate fuel vehicles and driverless cars, that all factors into it too. But again, it's running these large data centers. It's a lot of what they feel like is sustainability for them. So this is an MTA symbol. This is from, about what sustainability is at MTA and all the different kind of this big report from the president on sustainability and greening the MTA. That was done a few years ago. So for the MTA, which really is like a leader has been a pioneer in a lot of stuff that's going on in sustainability, is people onto mass transit. That's a big, they have a lot of kind of innovations there, but one of the big factors is just getting people onto mass transit. Using mass transit is by itself sustainable. One of the things I think they actually do a great job is talking about how, this actually might increase a little bit our footprint and our emissions and the things that we're doing, that our environmental impact. But because we service this public, the overall impact from all of us is going to be far less if you use our system than if you wouldn't. So I think that's a great concept, and that's, again, what sustainability means. There's no work on these New York City transit projects. There's a lot of, the MTA gets a lot of guff for doing anything. So this really helps them, outreach to the public, making these projects a lot more kind of friendly for the population too. So a lot of these sustainability that they're doing is really intended to help with the outreach, make these projects more acceptable, listening to the social and the social aspect, the environmental justice aspect of the projects they're working on. So that's a big part of what sustainability means to MTA. And the last one, which, again, looked a little bit better on my computer screen than on this one. This is Amazon. So Amazon, they employ a lot. So sustainability means to them is just employing more of a local workforce, kind of empowering more people with the jobs that they create. So that's a big part of what sustainability means to Amazon. And if you look through the reports, that's what sort of talking about, and like these initiatives of putting, the new headquarters in Long Island City, like employment. But also, they do have a lot of transportation back and forth, delivering packages, because again, they're becoming a large delivery. There, doing that more efficiently, driverless cars, alternate fuel vehicles. Doing that, try to lessen the impact of that. So again, we could probably go all day with these examples, but I just wanted to show you how different this can be at different organizations. And because they started with, this kind of process, they were able to kind of dial in on what exactly it means to them, and they're trying to minimize the impact to their organizations. They're not doing it like theoretically. All these organizations are doing it, and they're doing it because they're doing it in a very systematic, organized, and kind of well thought out approach. So let's give you this concept. So what I wanted to do sort of at this part, I'm going to get a little help, and you'll see that in a little bit, is just talk about some case studies. So these are actual projects I worked on. I want to kind of put a lot of this stuff now into a little bit more of a context. So in my current company, one of the first kind of clients I worked with was Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, or PennDOT. So they actually had a very robust environmental management system. All different maintenance districts, which there's 12 in Pennsylvania. It's a huge state. So they really wanted to engage their workers, lessening the impact. So they kind of really focused and found these are areas that are their main environmental impacts, putting the salt on the roads, repairing the roads, fixing potholes. So they fixed all this stuff in their operations and construction. These are the main areas. So how can we, again, minimize those impacts? And then also, we're talking about a workforce. A lot of people, some of them didn't even graduate high school. Most of them didn't graduate college. How can we relate these concepts of environmental management and sustainability to them? So, just like, I guess wanted to ask you here is, I know anyone has any ideas. I mean, I can tell you how we did it, how they did it. But anyone have any ideas? Like, how would you do this workforce? It's not all like, you super smart college, engineering students who are in the room with me right now. It's, people that taking the snow off the roads and doing salt and fixing potholes. Like, how would you engage them? Incentivize with money. That's good. But, just some constraints. We're talking about a public agency here.
Try to educate them with bringing in experts and showing them the practical side of
Yes.
mentoring.
Mentorship. Okay. Okay.
And in terms of efficiency.
Okay. I think all those kind of came into how we did it. But before I talk about this, I just wanted to go back, and this was their little PlanDoCheckAct. So they had this on their website, and I work with them a lot too. And I thought this just shows you how they have this sort of circular here, but it all starts with their policy. So up from the top, so they know each of those workers knows that this policy that they have comes from the DOT commissioner, who is on board with what they're doing. And how that comes about is what they call their green plan policy statement. And if you were a contractor working for them, like I was expected to have this in my wallet at all times. And they would quiz me on, they would quiz me on it. If I'm going there trying to help them out, they would make sure I had this thing in my wallet, which, is good. Each of them had this in their wallet, signed by Ms. Richards, Secretary of Treasury, very nice woman. It just shows that commitment, and they all had that commitment. So that was number one. So hey, if it comes from the top, I have to do this. The other thing was, hey, a lot of them actually, it's Pennsylvania, so got to remember, a lot of people are hunters and fishers. They love the environment. So just going to the back. If you want to be able to hunt and you want to be able to fish, you need to protect the environment. The salt that you're putting on the roads, that infects the trout streams. So we really kind of related that to what they were doing in their lives. And that concept was really powerful. Seems simple, but it's really powerful. And the other thing, which is on my slides, is you listen. You know, one of the things I was fortunate around is I get to ride around and talk to these people and see what they're doing, and I listened. You know, they had a lot of ideas. They're doing this basis. They know exactly what you're doing. They know a lot better than I ever will. So we listened to them, and we also started incorporating what they were saying into the plans. And you saw that feedlook. It came from the top, but we're getting it from, you know, not the bottom, but the other side of the org chart too. And that basically came up to a really robust and sort of well sort of documented and program where every worker was engaged. Because, you know, you don't want to be quizzing people on where your green plan policy statement card is if you don't have it yourself. So that was that case study. Now, second case study, bus depot. So nameless bus depot. So we had a client who put a lot of sustainable features into this bus depot. Main was green roof, and they asked us to do various things. The main thing, though, I mean, these are public agencies. They're putting a lot of money into these things. They're not cheap. They're expensive. Actually, more expensive, these sustainability features, than if you just did a regular type of design. So how do you make sure that you're using the public's money in the best way? I guess before we talk about that, I just wanted to see a little bit of the things that they were doing. This nice green roof. It's nice for taking pictures on, but it also serves a very important purpose. Insulation, reducing stormwater runoff, collects particulates, solar wall, and all these things, which you get to see the slides so you can study. That's a lot of money there. So we want to make sure that we're using the taxpayers' money, which I'm one of them, and you soon will be too. We're using that efficiency. So how would you evaluate that performance? Like, what would you do? Okay, I don't know if we have some other. So I know the names of like two or three people in here, so I don't want to pick on those two all the time. So I don't know. What would you do? Someone asked you, this nice green roof, did I get my money's worth out of it? Okay.
I guess you're seeing the performance of the plant growth. So you want to see, I guess, the life cycle, well, life cycle, the history.
Okay.
Dying, cleaning, how they replace it, how they
Okay. Yeah, no, that's important. Though, like, you know, this is a living thing, so some of it's going to die every year. So how to replace it, the cost of that.
You have some before construction come in and evaluate what the current performance is.
Okay. Yeah.
Compare it against that.
Okay.
How about like collecting public feedback?
Yeah. No, I think it's all good because, like a good thing about this green roof, it's like a layer of insulation on top. It collects stormwater. It's like a layer of insulation, and also the roof below it's not getting exposed to the sun. So it actually like sort of one of the big, you know, if you ever replace a roof on a house, you know it's super expensive, especially a huge bus depot the size of a Costco. So saving that roof, double the life of the roof, is a huge expense. One thing, you know, I don't have on the slides, and it reminded me when I saw this. You know, this is public housing here. This is what these people look at every day. It's so much nicer to look at that, right, than like the regular roof or a bus parked on top of the roof. So that's priceless right there, and that's what we're talking about, the social aspects of some of this. And for the answer, I'm going to have my colleague Lydia Berger talk about it. It's a little promotional, but it's I think a good concept.
I believe that we are currently on the verge of how sustainability is going to be evaluated and ultimately delivered on our project. So with current financial crisis, we certainly have to focus on being more fiscally responsible while delivering better environmental outcomes as well. And our policymakers, to a certain degree, already recognizing the need for that type of shift in how things are being procured. With the Executive Order 13514, there is now a need to evaluate certainly federal projects from a perspective of not only economic but also environmental and social outcomes as well. And the private sector clients also shifting that direction because they do have, or they actually have a key understanding of the need for being fiscally responsible and profitable, as well as creating those positive outcomes for their stakeholders. And here at Dewberry, we hopefully are becoming part of that solution, how things are happening and being evaluated in our projects. We offer here sustainable return on investment analysis that enables us, as well as our clients, to look at sustainable strategies on their projects from a perspective of cost-benefit analysis. So we are able to analyze or monetize those costs and benefits of our projects that are non-financial, looking specifically at things like monetizing impact of greenhouse gas emission reduction, or potentially a social cost of water saved from water efficiency measures. So we're not only able to look at the benefits, direct financial benefits of those strategies to clients, but also caring about those impacts on external stakeholders and the society as a whole.
Okay, we don't skip the end of it, but so you saw what Lydia was talking about. We're not just looking. I think one concept that everyone understands is money. So the one thing good about some of these tools, like what she was talking about with sustainable return on investment, we'll get into that in a second, is everyone is even. It's sort of, people sometimes don't understand those concepts, but again, everyone understands money. So good thing about tools, I think some of these tools that are coming out right now is that you can kind of communicate like that there's actually some cost savings to these, not only for the organization itself, but also for the sort of society at large from the projects. And again, structure, which profit enterprise, we want to make sure that we're using the money the most judiciously. We want to show that the other benefits also have a positive impact. So this is just sort of a traditional, like say, return on investment analysis that I did actually for a green roof. Sort of the basis of this was I was comparing the sort of return on investment of solar versus a green roof, and actually in this scenario, the green roof was actually a lot more efficient and cost effective, again, because it was the roof replacement. So this is just a little bit, just to give you a little bit. So that was a regular return on investment, which is like I put the money out essentially in the beginning, and it's all the different ways I'm saving it over a certain period of time, and figuring out what the rate of return on that is, if it's a positive or negative over the long haul. So this is a little bit about like what a sustainable return on investment's like. So typically we're just looking at these types of positives and negatives in the analysis. This is just the project. And then there could be also from a project, there could be some internal things that you kind of have a really good handle internally on money. And you're able to kind of include that in your project analysis. What I think the kind of interesting thing about sustainable return on investment is now you're starting to look at cost outside of the actual infrastructure project or whatever feature you're looking at. You're looking at greenhouse gas emission savings. A lot of these numbers are really kind of based in a lot of research that's done, so they're sort of be able to be backed up. So again, as you can see, especially for like a public entity, that is a huge decision-making thing, decision-making factor into what you're doing, the sustainable return on investment. And just to show you, for that green roof, we did the traditional payback, and that was about 15 years. We're still like working on the numbers there, but it was like 15 years, which was good. So when we factored in those, you got a little bit better. So again, it's not, I mean, we're not making investment choices on that, but that's just showing that if we incorporate that, that's actually having the thing that you want to take away is that these factors actually also are creating a positive cash flow or savings for society at large by implementing these sustainable features. So, next of three. So, nameless Class 1 railroad. So these are the freight rail. So now we had people, now we're moving freight, which you see all over. So, again, sustainable organizations, they calculate their greenhouse, they do a sustainability report, they calculate their greenhouse gas inventory, but they want to know their overall impacts, which is outside of their footprint. Like, what do you think there's some things that they could do there? Anyone have any ideas of, like, maybe evaluating their carbon? Any, okay. Yeah, exactly. Like, not themselves, but maybe the suppliers, they could look at those numbers and just get those too. I mean, anyone else have any idea? Okay, well, we're going to go into that. But again, oops, I have one of my colleagues here, Kim, who's working on this project actually with me. She's going to explain it for me.
Hi, my name is Kim Miersma, and I'm an environmental planner with Dewberry. I'm going to talk briefly about greenhouse gas inventories and Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. First, what is a greenhouse gas inventory? A greenhouse gas inventory is a comprehensive account of an entity's greenhouse gas emissions. Increasingly, companies are completing greenhouse gas inventories to quantify and report their greenhouse gas emissions. Emissions can be broken up into 3 different scopes: Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from a reporting company's owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy consumed by the reporting company. An example of Scope 2 emissions are emissions from a reporting company's purchased electricity, steam, heating, and cooling for the reporting company's own use. More and more, companies are taking into account greenhouse gas emissions from along their value chains, in addition to emissions from their own operations. These emissions are known as Scope 3 emissions.
Scope 3, yeah.
Scope 3 emissions can be broken out into upstream activities, such as emissions from a company's purchasing of goods and services, and downstream activities, like emissions from the use of a company's sold products. Improving awareness of corporate greenhouse gas emissions aids in the effective management of climate change risks. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks. This is a whiteboard in my office, and I draw on it all the time, as people know. My coworkers know. But this is like how we really brainstorm about these things, and this is like how it works. Again, we're doing a greenhouse gas inventory, so we're looking at all the upstream and downstream sources of greenhouse gases, and we're going through all of those and then actually quantifying that. So what they purchase, like what goes, greenhouse gases that go into building the locomotives, all of these things actually factored in. So we're trying to quantify this. And I guess our ultimate goal is to figure out ways of reducing that. So right now we're trying to quantify that, and then we could find out ways of possibly reducing that. Maybe, materials from Europe. So maybe there's a decision that's too far, and we want to see if we can do things more efficiently. So again, as you just see, it's about understanding a number and doing things a lot more efficiently. And we kind of went through all these different areas and quantified that. So scope 1 is their actual direct emissions. So like as you can see, as they're having the locomotive, from the actual locomotive itself as it's moving materials, that's scope 1. So scope 2 is we use electricity, so the electricity kind of generator has a greenhouse gas emissions, but we're directly actually causing them because we're using those. Scope 3 is sort of this downstream and upstream effect of like, well, we're not producing the emissions, we're not really any control over them except that we're purchasing a material, like a car or a locomotive or like railroad ties. So all that stuff actually goes into like your inventory. So I think a little run. So I had another video, but I think I'm just going to talk about it versus do. And the main thing too is the last thing I wanted to kind of get into different types of projects is so environmental engineers work with a lot of other types of engineers on projects. So we're trying to kind of incorporate these environmental management, sustainability concepts into project designs. So there's a lot of different ways that we have influence over them. One of the things we're trying to do is, I think a lot of need for buildings, but when it translated into some of the other work that we do, like a sewer system, sewer systems we talked about, or sort of transit lines, or other sort of non-buildings, then those systems kind of fall down. So because of that, there's these other systems, various systems, that could be another puzzle slide actually. But one is Envision. So the Envision system works really good for Jim's going to talk about that, but you can look, I can give you the link if you want to later. So Envision really looks at all of a project and different design choices and allows kind of the sustainability professional, the environmental professional, a seat at the table with the design engineers. So what it's really, the beauty of this, which I really like this system, and even LEED is the same way, it makes you think about like all these different factors before the design is done. You're not just like adding it on, bolting it on, you're incorporating it into it. So those designs are a lot more effective, they're less costly, and they're a lot more efficient. So that's why systems like Envision, LEED are so successful, because it gives us a seat at the table to sort of not just business as usual, which again is like almost a sort of, you could say that for sustainability too, doing things more efficiently, but it's not just business as usual. So, and the last one is this walk the walk. So this is outside. So this again, all the different programs, I just like randomly pick 3. But I think one of the other things about a successful organization is they're going to have a program, but they're also going to report on it. So you'll see a lot of different aspects of those. Like, we have our own sustainability report, our program, things we do. MTA does. They talk about it. Other, organizations that I work with, such as, has a social responsibility. So it just shows you all the, like, 3 completely kind of different organizations look at it 3 different ways. But it just shows you that they're thinking about it. So with that, I thank you for your attention and your participation. And if you had any questions.